The stepmother pressured her stepdaughter to become engaged to a beggar to embarrass her. On the day of the wedding, everyone was shocked when the beggar revealed his secret. The hot sun shone down on Fifth Avenue, where Caleb, a 28-year-old man, sat on the sidewalk. His hair was messy, and his clothes were torn. His blue eyes, once bright, now looked tired and sad because he was hungry and exhausted. Caleb watched the bustling crowd rush by, feeling invisible among them. His stomach growled loudly, reminding him he hadn't eaten in more than 2 days. Just one more day, he told himself, trying to stay hopeful. Someone will notice me today. But then he thought, who am I kidding? No one looks at a beggar. Hours passed slowly, and Caleb fought the urge to dig through trash cans for food. He had promised himself he wouldn't do that, but hunger made it hard to keep that promise. He noticed people walking by with bags of food or cups of coffee. The smell of a hot dog being sold nearby made his mouth water. Maybe I should try that shelter again, he thought, but he remembered how bad it had been last time and shuddered. Why did things have to be this way? I wish I had a family or a home, he thought sadly. As the afternoon wore on, he felt more hopeless. He saw other homeless people asking for change, but he couldn't find the courage to do the same. His pride was all he had left, and it stopped him from asking. An older man sitting nearby looked at Caleb with pity. Kid, sometimes things seem hopeless, but we survive, he said, his voice rough from age and life on the streets. Caleb replied, I know, but it feels like our lives will never change. We only get a few coins from kind people, but we need jobs, homes, and healthy food to eat. Suddenly, a middle-aged woman stopped in front of him. Without saying anything, she handed him a paper bag with a warm sandwich inside. The smell of fresh bread and roasted meat filled his nose. Thank you, ma'am. You have no idea how much this means to me, Caleb said, his voice full of emotion. The woman smiled gently and walked away, leaving Caleb amazed by her kindness. Maybe there is still kindness in this world, he thought, feeling a spark of hope. As Caleb prepared to enjoy the sandwich, he noticed 2 other men nearby. Their thin faces and hungry eyes looked just like his. Without hesitation, Caleb broke the sandwich into 3 pieces and offered them to his fellow hungry friends. Hey guys, let's share. No one should be hungry when we can help each other, he said kindly. Across the street, Lila, a young woman with long brown hair and caring green eyes, watched this kind moment. She felt sad to see Caleb sharing food and stepped toward the sidewalk, wanting to help. But then her stepmother, Margot, a middle-aged woman with a cold stare, grabbed her arm tightly. Don't even think about it, Lila. I won't let you be with those people. But they need help. How can we just ignore them? Lila argued. Margot pulled her away from the scene, leading her toward a fancy store. The shiny shop windows looked so different from the sad street. Lila looked back at Caleb, worried about him. Suddenly, she broke free and quickly crossed the street to Caleb and his friends. With trembling hands, she took out money from her purse and said, Please take this. I hope it can help. Caleb looked at Lila, surprised and touched by her kindness. Thank you, miss. Your kindness means more than you can imagine, he replied. It's nothing, really. I just wish I could do more, Lila said softly. Margot watched from far away, her face showing anger. Her gray eyes were on Caleb, who looked worn out. There was something about him that caught her attention. A plan started to form in her mind, one that could help her with many problems at once. Lila walked back to the sidewalk, ready to face her stepmother. She expected Margot to yell at her, but to her surprise, Margot just smiled coldly. Since you want to be around these people, maybe I should teach you a lesson about them, Margot said with a sarcastic tone. What are you planning, Margot? Lila asked, feeling worried. As they walked away, Margot took one last look at Caleb, her eyes shining with a cold determination. When they reached the mansion, Margot hurried inside, her heels making loud sounds on the marble floor. Lila followed quietly, still bothered by the day's events. Robert, Lila's father, came out of his office looking worried. "Margot, what's wrong?" he asked. "Your daughter is out of control. She almost talked to beggars on the street," Margot said angrily. "Beggars?" Robert looked confused. "Lila, is this true?" he asked, his voice tired. "I was just trying to help someone in need. I don't see what's wrong with that," Lila replied, her voice shaking but firm. Margot pulled Robert into the office, closing the door behind them. Lila could hear their argument through the thick wood. "Don't you see the danger? She's ruining our good name by being friends with those people," Margot said angrily. Robert sat down, running his hand over his tired face. "She has a good heart, Margot. We can't blame her for that," he replied weakly. "A good heart is a weakness we can't afford," Margot snapped. The argument grew louder, with Margot listing all of Lila's mistakes, donating to charities without asking, helping in poor neighborhoods, and skipping fancy social events. Robert listened, looking more worried. "She's ruining everything we've worked for, our reputation, our friends, everything. Her fixation on helping others is dangerous," Margot shouted. "But she's my daughter. I can't change who she is," Robert protested. Margot stopped pacing, her eyes gleaming dangerously. "I have a plan," she said, suddenly calm. Robert perked up, knowing that when she said this, something bad was coming. "What kind of plan?" he asked cautiously. "A plan to teach Lila a lesson," Margot said, a cold smile on her face. "That beggar Lila wanted to help. What if we used him to show her that people like him are not good?" "What are you suggesting?" Robert asked, feeling scared. Margot stood up and walked to the window. "Marriage," she said with a cruel satisfaction. "We will make Lila marry that beggar." Robert almost choked on his drink. "You've gone mad. That's monstrous," he exclaimed, standing up. "No, it's necessary," Margot replied. "Think about it. What better way to show Lila the harsh reality of the world than by making her live with someone like him?" Robert began pacing back and forth. "But what about her happiness? My daughter deserves more than this," he argued. Margot turned to him, her eyes determined. "Happiness? We're talking about her future. Lila needs to understand the consequences of her actions," she explained. "This doesn't seem right, Margot. My daughter wouldn't care about a simple man. She has a good heart," Robert replied. Margot laughed a cold, humorless laugh. "Oh, Robert, do you really think she could handle it? A few days living with that beggar and she'll be begging to come back to her senses," she said. Robert leaned against the desk, worry etched on his face. "How are we going to make him agree to this?" he asked. "Money, dear. We'll offer him an amount he can't refuse. For someone in his situation, it will be an irresistible offer," Margot replied confidently. Robert stared blankly ahead, torn between his love for Lila and fear of their plan. "I don't know, Margot. This feels too extreme. Can't we just talk to her?" he murmured, doubt creeping into his voice. Margot stepped closer. "Robert, words aren't enough. Lila needs to see reality sometimes. We have to be tough to protect those we love," she argued. "But forcing a marriage? Playing with my daughter's life like this? There must be another way," Robert protested. He walked over to the window, looking out at the world beyond, a place full of dangers for his daughter. With a deep sigh, he turned to Margot. "This won't end well. You're underestimating Lila and her strength," he said, genuine concern lacing his words. Irritated by his lack of enthusiasm, Margot crossed her arms, her eyes flashing with frustration. "Your hesitation is why Lila is out of control. You're her father. You must teach her to protect her reputation," she snapped. Outside, the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Caleb, a homeless man, sat on a worn bench watching people pass by. When Margot approached him, she looked out of place in her designer coat and high heels. "You're the beggar from earlier, right? I'm Margot, Lila's stepmother," The woman who helped you. I have a proposal that could change your life, she said with a false smile. Caleb stood up, confused and a bit defensive. Yes, I'm Caleb. What do you want? He replied, his voice hoarse. Margot wasted no time. She explained her plan for Caleb to marry Lila, promising him a life of comfort and luxury in exchange for his cooperation. Caleb listened, wide-eyed. You want me to marry your stepdaughter, the kind woman who helped me, just for money? He asked, incredulous. Margot nodded, her smile unwavering. Think about it, Caleb. You would never have to worry about food or a place to sleep again. You could have everything you've always wanted, she insisted. I can't accept this. I can't use someone like that, especially someone who was kind to me, Caleb said, shaking his head. Margot seemed irritated but quickly changed her tactics. Think about the good you could do with this money. You could help your friends on the streets who are hungry and in need, she suggested, her voice low and persuasive. Caleb hesitated, his hands clenching into fists as he considered her words. I could really make a difference, he murmured, envisioning his hungry friends. Isn't that what Lila would do? Use her resources to help others? Margot pressed, sensing Caleb's wavering resolve. As he pondered, his eyes caught a gold brooch on Margot's coat, shaped like a rose entwined with vines. It stirred a distant memory. I've seen that brooch before, he said, his voice trembling with emotion. Margot stepped back, surprised. It's just an old family jewel. Nothing important, she quickly replied, covering it with her hand. Strange. I remember this brooch. A woman was singing to me, Caleb thought, struggling to grasp the memory. Shall we go? I'm sure you'll help many with this decision, Margot urged, gesturing for him to follow her. Caleb nodded, turning to his street friends. Don't worry, I'll be back. I'll find a way to help all of you, he promised. Later, as he sat in Margot's luxurious car, he couldn't shake the feeling of familiarity regarding her brooch. I hope I'm doing the right thing. But if this helps others, maybe it's worth it, he murmured to himself. When they arrived at the mansion, Caleb was in awe of its grandeur. Lila, reading by her window, looked out and was shocked to see Caleb stepping out, looking nervous and out of place. What's going on? Why is that man here? She thought, feeling her heart race with worry. Margot led Caleb inside, exchanging a meaningful glance with Lila. Wait here, she instructed Caleb, leaving him in the entrance hall. She then climbed the stairs to Lila's bedroom, ready to reveal her plans. Lila was very scared when Margot said, It would be a shame if the police found something bad in his things, don't you think? Lila knew Margot was being mean. You wouldn't do that. He's innocent, she said, feeling very worried about what could happen to Caleb. Why are you doing this, Margot? What do you want? Lila asked. Margot smiled in a scary way and said, What I want is for you to be a good daughter-in-law who knows her place. You will learn that your kindness doesn't help everyone. Some people don't deserve it. Lila felt trapped and thought about Caleb. She had seen him come earlier, and the idea of him getting hurt made her very sad. What will happen to Caleb if I say yes to you? She asked softly. Margot replied, He will have a nice life away from the streets, and you will learn a lesson about the real world. Her voice sounded almost kind, but it was really cold, making Lila shiver. Caleb was taken to a fancy bathroom in his new room. He was amazed by the big marble bathtub and all the nice things on the counter. The butler told him, Everything you need is here. Caleb nodded, still shocked. When he was alone, he turned on the faucet and let the hot water fill the tub. He thought to himself, How long has it been since I had a real bath? Slowly, he took off his old, torn clothes. He wondered if all the dirt would come off. As he got into the warm water, he sighed happily. Years of dirt started to wash away as he scrubbed his body with a soft sponge and nice-smelling soap. He put his head under the water, washing his hair over and over again. The water turned dark with all the dirt he had carried for so long. Caleb stayed in the tub until the water was cool, enjoying every moment. "It feels like being reborn," he whispered, looking at his clean skin for the first time in years. Wrapped in a fluffy towel, Caleb looked at himself in the foggy mirror. His beard was long and messy, hiding his face. With shaky hands, he picked up a razor and shaving cream. He started to shave, slowly revealing his face. Each stroke felt like he was getting rid of not just hair, but also the hard life he had lived. When he finished, he barely recognized himself. "My God, is that really me?" he said, touching his smooth cheeks. It felt like he was looking at a stranger from his past. Dressed in the new, soft clothes left for him, Caleb felt out of place. The fabric felt strange compared to the rags he was used to. He took a deep breath and looked at himself one last time in the mirror. "You can do this. With a life like this, you can help many people," he told himself as he walked down the stairs. When he reached the bottom, everyone stared at him. Lila gasped when she saw him. Their eyes met, and for a moment, it felt like time had stopped. "Caleb, I almost didn't recognize you," she whispered, surprised. Margot gave him a mean look and said, "Good. You cleaned up well, at least." Caleb nodded, not knowing what to say, and walked toward the dining room. Days went by quickly, filled with busy preparations and growing worries. Now, Lila sat in a fancy salon, looking at herself in the mirror while the hairstylist worked on her wedding hairstyle. Her eyes were sad, but also determined as she thought about Caleb and how much he had changed recently. He must feel lost too. Maybe this marriage will help him, she said quietly to herself. The hairstylist noticed Lila's serious face and asked, "Are you excited for the big day?" Lila paused before answering. "It's complicated, but I want to make the best of it." She remembered the sweet moments she shared with Caleb, the shy smiles and thankful looks in his eyes. He deserves a chance to start fresh. Maybe together we can help each other, she thought. As the hairstylist finished Lila's hair, she looked around the salon. She thought about all the people who needed help just like Caleb did. She started to think of ways to use her new life to make a difference, even if she couldn't change everything. "Are you happy with your hair?" the stylist asked. "It's perfect, thank you." Lila smiled for real this time. She felt hopeful. This could be the start of something important, she thought with determination. Then she overheard two staff members talking. "That's Margot's stepdaughter. Do you remember the scandal about her stepmother?" one whispered. The other nodded and said, "I can't forget. They said she was involved in something terrible, but they never proved anything." But their gossip stopped when they saw Lila looking at them in the mirror. They quickly backed away, looking guilty. Lila felt her heart race as anxiety bubbled up inside her. What was Margot hiding? Sometimes Lila wondered if Margot was truly who she said she was. She had claimed to love being part of their family, but her actions suggested otherwise. Lila reflected on the past few days, remembering how Margot had avoided talking about her life before marrying Robert. There seemed to be a mystery there, and Lila was determined to uncover it. Standing by the salon window, Lila gazed at her reflection. She didn't just see a bride. She saw a woman with a purpose. "I'm going to find out the truth," she promised herself, her face set in determination. Irritated by her husband's lack of enthusiasm, Margot crossed her arms, her eyes flashing with frustration. "Your hesitation is why Lila is acting out. You're her father. You must teach her how to protect her reputation," she snapped. Outside, the sun began to set, painting the sky in oranges and pinks. Caleb, a homeless man, sat on a worn bench, watching people walk by. When Margot approached, she looked out of place in her fancy coat and high heels. "You're the beggar I saw earlier, right? I'm Margot, Lila's stepmother, the woman who helped you. I have an offer that could change your life," she said with a fake smile. Caleb stood up, defensive. "Yes, I'm Caleb. What do you want?" he replied, his voice rough. Margot wasted no time. She explained her plan. Caleb should marry Lila in exchange for a life of comfort and luxury. Caleb listened, wide-eyed. "You want me to marry your stepdaughter for money?" he asked, incredulous. Margot nodded, her smile unwavering. "You'd never have to worry about food or a place to sleep again. You could have everything you've always wanted," she insisted. "I can't accept this. I can't use someone like that, especially someone who was kind to me," Caleb said, shaking his head. Margot seemed annoyed, but quickly changed her tactics. "Think about the good you could do. You could help your friends on the streets who are hungry," she suggested, lowering her voice to sound more persuasive. Caleb hesitated, his hands clenching as he considered her words. "I could really make a difference," he murmured, picturing his hungry friends. "Isn't that what Lila would do? Use her resources to help others?" Margot pressed, sensing Caleb's uncertainty. As he thought, he noticed a gold brooch on Margot's coat, shaped like a rose entwined with vines. It stirred a memory. "I've seen that brooch before," he said, voice trembling. Margot stepped back, surprised. "It's just an old family jewel. Nothing important," she quickly replied, covering it with her hand. "Strange. I remember that brooch. A woman was singing to me," Caleb thought, struggling to grasp the memory. "Shall we go? I'm sure you'll help many with this decision," Margot urged, gesturing for him to follow. Caleb nodded, turning to his street friends. "Don't worry, I'll be back. I'll find a way to help all of you," he promised. Later, as he sat in Margot's luxury car, he couldn't shake the feeling that her brooch looked familiar. "I hope I'm doing the right thing. But if this helps others, maybe it's worth it," he murmured. When they arrived at the mansion, Caleb was in awe of its grandeur. Lila, reading by her window, was shocked to see him stepping out, looking nervous. "What's going on? Why is that man here?" she thought, her heart racing with worry. Margot led Caleb inside and instructed him to wait in the entrance hall while she climbed the stairs to Lila's bedroom, ready to share her plans. Lila felt scared when Margot said, "It would be a shame if the police found something bad in his things, don't you think?" Lila knew Margot was being cruel. "You wouldn't do that. He's innocent," she exclaimed. "Why are you doing this, Margot?" "What do you want?" Lila asked. Margot smiled ominously, saying, "I want you to be a good daughter-in-law who knows her place. You will learn that your kindness doesn't help everyone." Lila felt trapped and thought of Caleb. "What will happen to Caleb if I say yes to you?" she asked softly. Margot replied, "He will have a nice life away from the streets, and you will learn a lesson about the real world." Her voice sounded almost kind, but it was cold, making Lila shiver. Caleb was taken to a luxurious bathroom in his new room. He marveled at the marble bathtub and all the nice things on the counter. The butler told him, "Everything you need is here." Caleb nodded, still shocked. When he was alone, he turned on the faucet and let hot water fill the tub. "How long has it been since I had a real bath?" he wondered, slowly taking off his old, torn clothes. As he sank into the warm water, he sighed happily. Years of dirt washed away as he scrubbed with a soft sponge and fragrant soap. He put his head under water, washing his hair repeatedly. The water darkened with the dirt he had carried for so long. Caleb stayed in the tub until the water cooled, relishing every moment. "It feels like being reborn," he whispered, admiring his clean skin for the first time in years. Wrapped in a fluffy towel, Caleb looked at himself in the foggy mirror. His beard was long and messy, hiding his face. With shaky hands, he picked up a razor and shaving cream. He started to shave, revealing his face. Each stroke felt like shedding not just hair, but also the hard life he had lived. When he finished, he barely recognized himself. "My God, is that really me?" he said, touching his smooth cheeks. Dressed in new, soft clothes, Caleb felt out of place. The fabric felt strange compared to his rags. He took a deep breath and looked at himself one last time in the mirror. "You can do this. With a life like this, you can help many people," he told himself as he walked down the stairs. At the bottom, everyone stared at him. Lila gasped, shocked. Their eyes met, and for a moment, it felt like time stopped. "Caleb, I almost didn't recognize you," she whispered, surprised. Margot gave him a mean look and said, "Good, you cleaned up well." Caleb nodded, unsure of what to say, and walked toward the dining room. Days went by quickly, filled with busy preparations and growing worries. Lila sat in a salon, looking at herself in the mirror as the hairstylist worked on her wedding hairstyle. Her eyes were sad, but also determined as she thought about Caleb. He must feel lost too. Maybe this marriage will help him, she reflected. The hairstylist asked, "Are you excited for the big day?" Lila paused. "It's complicated, but I want to make the best of it," she replied. Then she overheard two staff members gossiping about Margot. "Do you remember the scandal about her stepmother?" one whispered. The other nodded, saying, "I can't forget. They said she was involved in something terrible." Their gossip stopped when they noticed Lila watching. They quickly backed away, looking guilty. Standing by the salon window, Lila gazed at her reflection. She didn't just see a bride, she saw a woman with a purpose. "I'm going to find out the truth," she promised herself. Hours later, the sun shone brightly on the grand church, where luxurious cars began to arrive. Caleb stood nervously at the entrance, feeling the weight of curious eyes. Guests whispered words like "beggar" and "scandal." Then, an elderly gentleman approached, leaning on a cane. His eyes widened in recognition. "It can't be," he whispered. Caleb felt hope, thinking this man might not judge him. The elderly man leaned closer. "Young man, I need to speak with you immediately. It's urgent," he said, his voice trembling. "Not here. Meet me at the back of the church in 5 minutes. There are things you need to know," the old man said before hurrying away. Caleb stood still, his heart racing. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together, but the picture was more disturbing than he could have imagined. "What's going on? Who is this man? And what does he have to tell me?" he wondered, his mind spinning. When the elderly man revealed the truth, Caleb was shocked. He returned to the church, where tension filled the air as guests settled into their seats. Standing at the altar, he felt his heart pound. The old man's words echoed in his mind as he anxiously watched the entrance, determined to stay strong for Lila. The Reverend noticed Caleb's tense expression. "Is everything all right, young man?" he whispered. Caleb nodded, clenching his jaw. "I need to stay strong. Lila deserves to know the truth, but not like this." Then the music began to play, and everyone turned to the entrance. Lila appeared in her wedding dress, but her eyes revealed fear and determination. Each step she took seemed like a struggle, as if she was marching toward an uncertain fate. Margot, sitting in the front row, watched with a sinister smile. When Lila reached the altar, their eyes met, creating a silent connection. But as Reverend Mitchell began the ceremony, Caleb felt the weight of his secret overshadow everything. The moment of truth arrived. "If anyone has a reason why this marriage should not take place, speak now or forever hold your peace," the Reverend announced. Silence filled the church. Caleb's heart raced as he felt the truth burning in his throat, but he fought the urge to speak. Then, to everyone's shock, Margot stood up. "I have something to say," she declared. Caleb's heart stopped when he saw Margot walking down the aisle. Panic filled him. "What is she doing? Does she know my secret?" Margot had a mean smile as she stood at the altar. "Dear guests," she said sweetly, "I think you all deserve to know the truth about this wedding." Caleb watched as she pointed at Lila, who looked scared. "This young woman thought she could be friends with poor people," Margot said, "and look where that got her." Lila felt tears in her eyes but fought to stay strong. "Margot, please don't do this," she whispered. "It's too late for please," Margot replied sharply. "You made your choice." Margot spread her arms like she was putting on a show. "Look, everyone. This is the bride who wants to marry a beggar, a man who was living on the streets just a week ago." Gasps echoed through the church as people reacted to her words. Caleb clenched his fists in anger. Finally, Robert, Lila's dad, stood up. "Margot, stop. How can you do this to my daughter?" Margot laughed coldly. "Your daughter chose this life. Now she has to deal with it." Lila's face turned red with embarrassment, but she looked determined. She stepped forward to talk to Margot, but before she could say anything, Caleb jumped in front of her. His eyes were fierce. "That's enough of your lies, Margot," he shouted. The church fell silent, everyone holding their breath. Margot stepped back, surprised by Caleb's bravery. "What are you doing?" she hissed. Caleb looked her in the eyes, ready to share the truth. "It's time for the truth to come out," he said, growing stronger with each word. "The truth is, my real name is Hudson Howard. I know it sounds strange, but that's the name I was given when I was born. I am the son of Jonathan Howard, Margot's first husband." Just then, an old man spoke about a boy who had disappeared long ago. That boy was Caleb. He recognized Caleb's birthmark, the same one Jonathan's son had before he vanished. Caleb continued, "Margot, you were my father's second wife. When he died, you got everything he owned, but I was in the way. I was the real heir, but you wanted to keep your fancy life, so you got rid of me. You left me alone in a town far away, and everyone believed your story about me disappearing. For years, I felt lost, but something always pulled me back to this city, like I belonged here." He looked at Margot. "You didn't recognize me when you saw me on the streets. It's ironic you hate beggars because every time you see one, you remember the boy you abandoned." Turning to Lila, Caleb said, "Your kindness helped me face the truth. You showed me how to care for others, and now I see everything clearly. Margot, your obsession with being important and your hate for poor people were to cover up what you did to me and my father. But that ends now. The truth is out, and you can't hide anymore. You have to face the consequences of what you did. You stole my life and hurt many people, including Lila and her dad, Robert. I'm here as Caleb Howard, taking back my true identity and my rightful place in the world, ready to make sure justice is done." After Caleb spoke, the church erupted in noise. Lila stood frozen and crying, feeling the weight of Caleb's words. Margot looked pale, as if the truth was too heavy for her to carry. Robert stepped back, shocked by what he learned about his wife. Days later, everything changed. Caleb wanted to prove who he was, so he took a DNA test with a family member of the Howards. When the lawyer opened the envelope, he said, "It's positive. Caleb is definitely the long-lost son of Jonathan Howard." Caleb and Lila grew closer, bonded by their experiences. They had a small private wedding, very different from what Margot had planned. This time there was no trickery, just true love and a shared wish to make the world better. "Lila," Caleb said, holding her hands, "what do you think about using our money to help people like you?" They started a foundation to help homeless people and abandoned children, providing shelter, education, and opportunities for those society often forgot. Caleb's story of going from beggar to long-lost heir captured everyone's hearts, showing that anyone could overcome tough times. Their foundation opened shelters, offered job training, and provided scholarships, making a real difference in the community. As the years passed, Caleb and Lila looked back with gratitude. What began with a simple act of kindness turned into a movement that changed lives. Together, they showed that kindness has the power to change the world. If you enjoyed this story and would like to see more content like it, I encourage you to subscribe to my channel. By subscribing, you'll stay updated on all our latest inspiring and heartwarming stories and have the opportunity to engage with our growing community. Additionally, I would love to hear your thoughts and feedback in the comments section below. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to sharing more captivating narratives with you.